Recording in progress. It sure is. All right, good morning. So, you know what? I should have also pulled up Canvas because we'll go through the instructions together. Let's see. I always just Google UNLV Canvas. It's the easiest way to find it. Um, See, I told you my password's dot 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 as well. What a strange coincidence. All right, let's see. Push notification. Yeah, no, it's not me. I just accidentally typed in all my login credentials. All right, come on. There we go. 767. All right. And anybody just joined us, we're just getting started. Today's a demonstration. We'll go through the basics of Rhino and talk a little bit and then go through the steps for parts one, and hopefully part two, maybe even a little bit of part three. I'm recording this and we'll put that recording on Canvas for you guys if you need to refer to it later. Anytime I do demonstrations, I like to record things, and that way you can go back and replay if you need to. I found that that's one of the benefits of doing stuff over Zoom. Makes it really easy to record when I need to. So remember, we're going to start planar compositions part one. And basically what I've done is I've given you the workflow, step-by-step instructions with a few diagrams, including some specific measurements. Yeah, let's see. Here we go. Step by step, but it looks like we will be, ta-da, drawing. And we'll be drawing at right angles and on the XY axis. So we'll be talking about ortho, and we'll actually be making things align. So we'll also talk about object snaps and grid snaps. We'll talk about setting scale and setting units. Setting units. So we'll set things to feet and inches, and then we'll start to make very precise drawings, given the diagrams. Eventually, we'll do some trimming and splitting. We'll have these pieces, and then we have to reassemble them in some way that'll require us to turn them into surfaces and then start to move them around and rotate them in space, etc. So, not a bad day. And if you know some AutoCAD, then Rhino will look fairly, won't look alien to you at all, look fairly familiar. Can you guys see my screen all right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So this is what Rhino looks like right out of the box, I usually, except yours probably has like a muddy gray background. I really don't like that. It makes it hard to see the line work for me. So I changed mine to white. And I'm actually going to show you how to do that if you want, if you don't change it to white or black, if you're used to an AutoCAD environment that way. I'm also going to turn off this grid. This grid is when you zoom out, it becomes like just this sort of gray field. It's visually distracting. I really can't stand it. I wish I could turn it off always by default. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, sorry, I didn't explain what I just did. I went to the tools pull down and to the options down at the very bottom of that pull down menu. Here you'll find in the Windows version of Rhino every single option you ever possibly wanted and needed and more. And so what it does is it brings up this box with a bunch of categories over on the left-hand side, and then all the sort of appropriate settings you can toggle on or off or adjust parameters with on the right. So if I go to grid, I'm just going to turn my grid off. Oof. Yeah, just turn that off. Get that out of here. All right. So, and of course, you can always go to, I believe it's appearance and colors, and you can change what things look like when they're selected, the background, etc. So again, I'm in tools pull down, options, and then it brings up this Rhino's options box. And now I'm going through some of these. And we'll return to this as we go. I don't expect you to remember that key detail right away, but we'll continue to sort of reinforce that. We'll go back and we'll start changing how our display modes work and creating new displayed modes, custom ones, and things like that. So, our craft is making drawings, right? And so when it comes to display properties and display modes, we can easily customize these things to really well fine tune and craft the outputs just the way we want them to look. All right, so I hit cancel instead of okay. Let's see options, and let's see, where'd I go? Oh, grid. Yeah, turn that grid off. I'm just going to turn it off. You don't have to do that if you like it. Now I'm going to go back to tools and options. And I'm just going to go ahead and double check about a quarter of the way down, maybe a third of the way down is units. And go ahead and click on units. And by default, Rhino might have your units set to millimeters. That's because they, sell things worldwide, not just to the United States and its territories and I don't know who else uses the imperial system still. But you can easily set things to inches, feet, miles, angstroms, nanometers, decimeters, hectometers, decameters, gigameter, whatever. It's silly, silly. Parsecs and light years are just dumb. But of course you have your metric and your imperial units. I'm going to set mine to feet. And in this case, I'm just going to say decimal. I'm not going to necessarily worry about feet and inches. I'll just set mine to decimal. You can set it to feet and inches if you'd like, but I'm just going to go ahead and leave it by default. But I'm going to make sure everything's set to feet before I start drawing, right? Try to engender some good habits here. All right, and then a couple of things you'll notice. We have pull-down menus, we have tabs, we have a toolbar on the left, we have a box on the right. Mine is docked over on the right-hand side, and you can see that I have lots of different options that I can then start to display in this box, right? I have layers, properties, sun settings, render properties. Here's my Forma import export. We'll do that later. Here's materials and shaders, etc. Um, if you don't have that, I'll show you where that is. And then finally, it put these object snap options over on the left-hand side underneath my toolbar. They used to be down here at the bottom, and yours might be at the bottom as well. But what you'll notice at the bottom is I have things, a couple of tabs called Grid Snap, Ortho, Planar, O Snap, Smart Track, and Gumball. Then Auto C Plane, and then Record History. Um, so we'll be toggling some of these things on and off as we go. And that's why I like to record because sometimes it's easy to forget a day or even an hour later, like, okay, what did he do? How is he drawing in 90-degree increments? Or how did he get things to snap to exactly where he wanted to a midpoint or something like that? So totally understand. That's why we're recording this. And I'll try to be as explicit as possible when I'm clicking particular things, particularly if they're important and anyway, attention to detail, right? That's what I'll try to do. So by default, I think I have four views already up, four viewports, top, front, right, perspective. You'll see at that label, there's a pull down menu. And so again, we can always look at a series of settings, set view. I can always change this. Let's say I don't need a top view, but I want a back view or a perspective, another isometric view or something like that. I can always change it. Um, but more about that later. And you won't necessarily remember this stuff right offhand. Again, practice, right? And what I've done is over the next few weeks, it's designed sometimes to be even rote, I would say, but that is to try to give you some practice and to develop the muscle memory. So that some of these things just become second nature to you. You take them for granted. You don't even think about where the planar, ortho, or OSNAP tabs are or whatever. So, all right. Um, so let me just quickly uh, talk about a few things here on this box. I think by default you'll have a box that's called layers. If I right click over here on this toolbar, like underneath all the icons, you'll see that I'll come up and it'll ask you for all the different icons you want over here. I'm going to make sure that I have layers. I'm going to make sure I have properties for now. Don't necessarily need anything else at the moment. And go ahead and set this to layers. What you can see is that it already has 6 default layers. One called default, literally called or named default, and then layers 1 through 5. Each one has the sort of typical RGB valued color, 0, 220, 25500 or 0, 2550, etc. And then we have green and violet and some white. So you can create your own, right? You can start to make new layers. If I want to rename any of these, I just click on the layer name. I can start to type in a new name. For default, I'm just going to type in, I'm going to say curves and lines, line work. Maybe I'll just say line work. That looks a little more tight here, a little more concise. And then over here, I'm going to say surfaces. And I'm just naming these so that I know what I want to use them for later and hopefully to remind myself as I'm creating new geometry to put them on the right layers. Sometimes it's easy to forget that. File management is always key. And so, again, to try to engender good habits, good working habits, I always try to check my units before I start to work, make sure that the units are set properly, and then I start to think about layers. And if I can plan some things out in advance, I do. All right. Right. So let's get started. Um, the toolbar over here on the left, right? I typically keep my tabs in standard. But so I'll just leave them that way. But you can see that we have the fairly common things like a new file, open a file, save a file, print, blah, 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 blah. Here we have rotate view, zoom, zoom with a by drawing a window and zooming in on just on that window, or zoom extents, sort of fitting all to the screen, etc. Right? So what you'll notice is that if you have, let me back up. What you'll notice is that it can be kind of cumbersome to navigate in Rhino and Revit, I'll say, both of those platforms without a mouse. And I recommend getting a mouse that has a left and right button, left and right buttons, as well as some sort of middle button or scroll. I just have this silly magic mouse that came. This is like an ancient relic. It probably could sell at an antique store, and it still works and doesn't have a short in the cord yet, the cable yet. And I like to plug it in with a USB adapter because I hate changing batteries on things. So anyway, I'm just ancient dinosaur, I guess. But I can sort of zoom in and out with that scroll. I can when I hold down the right click, I can pan in the ortho views, and in the three-dimensional views like perspective and axonometric, it lets me dolly or tumble or rotate. Right? So I can zoom in or out, dolly, rotate, etc. Right? So again, just a little bit of muscle memory to develop. Um, and when I'm in a 3D view, if I want the right click to pan like the other views, I can hold down the Shift key on my keyboard. And now it pans. I can just sort of move rather than rotate. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me just double check chat. I think Elena was looking for a good laptop. Yeah, my order game laptop. Okay, yeah, the price is reasonable. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Gene. And again, I'm recording this, so if you miss out on something, don't worry. You can always go back and replay once I have it processed, and you have to upload it to YouTube and then embed it into Canvas for you. Okay. So, all right, let's get started drawing. Right, first step. Let's draw a 40 foot by 40 foot square, and then I'll make 4 copies of it. Right. Okay, the toolbar is where you have most of your tools. Surprise. That's why it's called a toolbar. Let's see. The way to think about this toolbar is that there is a logic to how this thing is laid out. There's a sort of hierarchy to things. First of all, I have my cursor, but when it comes to making geometry, I have points at the top, and then I can use points to make lines and curves and shapes. Right? So down below, you'll see that I can have polylines and different types of splines. When you see a tool with the little caret at the bottom right, that means you can click and hold, and then you can see that there's all kinds of ways to make lines and polylines. There's all kinds of ways to make curves and Bezier splines and things like that. Right? Of course, these are just freehand, but then you can also make polygons like circles, ellipses, multi-sided things, fours, rectangles, squares, etc. And then down at the bottom, towards the bottom of the line work is our not line, or sorry, not curve creating tools, but curve editing tools, right? Modification tools. So we have things like fillet and trim, join, split, extend, connect, rebuild, etc. Right? And some of these things might start to make more sense once we get into the actual workflows. Okay, you'll pick this up as you go. Right? That's the fastest way to learn. I can show you what each tool does, but that's just kind of silly. But really, the way you learn is by applying these things. And anyway, so we have points. We use points to make curves. We use curves to make surfaces. Right. So here we have different ways to make surfaces. There's, I can define vertices. I can give it a closed planar curve and then let it fill in the inside. I can give it a series of sections and then have it skin along them. That's called lofting. It's kind of the opposite of how the shipbuilding industry used to work, or a surface from 2, 3, or 4 edge curves, etc. Right. So depending on the ingredients you have that you need to use to make a surface, there's usually a technique here that you can begin to use. Extrude, rotate, sweep, revolve, patch, etc. Right? So you can even drape surfaces over things, and that's one of the Rhino's superpowers is NURBS surface modeling, and then some sub-D modeling as well, which we'll talk about much later. Okay. Beyond that, you can also make solids. Solids are basically just a set of poly surfaces, surfaces that are joined together at the edges. And so when you cut a solid, it's not actually solid on the inside; it's actually empty. And the all the sort of sides or edges of the faces, I guess, of the solids are just infinitely thin surfaces. Right. So, for instance, if I draw a cube, well, some sort of rectangular prism, and I go to the inside of it. Let's see if I do that. Let's get in the inside. Maybe not. If I explode it, I take off one of the edges. You see that it's a hollow on the inside. Okay. All right. Then there are more tools. We'll talk about these later, but things like join and explode, trim and split, and then we have all of our sort of geometric operations: move, scale, copy, rotate, orient, array, etc. Right? There's lots of different tools to play around with. This is meant to give you an introduction to some of the basics. All right, so I'm just going to start drawing shapes. I'm going to do that. They need to be flat, so I'm going to go ahead and do that one of my ortho views. In this case, I'll just work in top view. And I'm just going to go to the polyline button over here. You'll notice that every time I press a command, or sorry, press a button over here in the toolbar, you see in the command line, hopefully for you it's at the top just like mine, but sometimes it's at the bottom, or maybe if you're using the Mac version, it shows up in a different place. Maybe along the left-hand side in the toolbar. I'm not fond of the Rhino, the Mac Rhino for Mac interface. I learned on the Windows side, and but anyway, just so you know, if I can actually start to type, and when I type, it starts to enter in the command into the command line. It's not quite as efficient as AutoCAD was, where I can just hit L and spacebar for enter. But you can use start typing in polyline. It'll try to IntelliSense what you're doing. I could then hit, the space bar, enter, right? Those of you who used to use CAD, you sort of, you probably impulsively hit escape a lot with your left hand or right hand, depending on if you're lefty or righty. And then using L space bar, C space bar, A space bar, TR, etc. Here, the commands are very similar, except they want full words. You can't just sort of type in one or two letters. I think there's actually a way to change that and customize it. If you really want to get under the hood, you can. But anyway, start a polyline. I'm just going to go ahead and click somewhere. Now, again, whenever whether I'm typing in the command and hit enter, or whether I hit a tool button over here in the toolbar, the command line is going to ask me or tell me what it wants as an ingredient, right? It's going to say, oh, you want me to make a polyline? The ingredients would be the vertices of the polyline. So start giving me points. You could either type in XYZ coordinates like 0, 0, 0, or I can just simply click on the screen. So I'm just going to click on the screen. You can see now that's the first point. Now it wants a second point, and it's going to let me freehand this bad boy all over the place, right? So when we are drawing, I think more constrained shapes like cubes and squares and rectangles and circles and things like that, um, what we can do is we can set our mode to ortho mode, right? So hopefully you can see my cursor. I'm just going to shake it really quickly so you can see it really large. And that's one of the things that the Mac OS does. All right, you see it down here now where it says planar, and then next to it is ortho. Ortho isn't highlighted in that sort of blue violet. I'm going to go ahead and click it, toggle it on, so now it's bold and it's highlighted. And so now look what happens. For those of you who are new to this, when I click a line, now the next the next segment of the polyline is going to be constrained to 90-degree increments, right? So it's going to be constrained to the X or Y axis. This is exactly what I'm looking for right now. And instead of just moving off in some direction and hitting click, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in 40, right? Automatically, you'll see in the command line up here. See in the command line up here, 40. And my units are already set to feet, so I don't even have to specify feet, and hit enter. Now it's going to constrain not only my line segment in the X and Y direction, depending on which way I click, but also at 40 feet from the original point, right? So now I start at that point. Now I'm constrained to X, Y. I'm going to go ahead and move up. I'm going to type in another 40 feet, click, then to the left, 40 feet, click. And I could do another 40 feet, or I could do see what happens when I hit snap. when I get close to the original start point, it actually senses that maybe I'm trying to snap directly to that point. So if you don't have O snap toggled, it's down here. So we had ortho right over here, planar, O snap. What that does when I have it highlighted and bolded is it gives me a set of options for the things I want, objects I want to snap to if I get close. So right now I have something called endpoints, any stray points out in space, a midpoint, intersections, perpendiculars, knots, vertices. What you see is that since I have endpoint selected, when I get close to this endpoint of this first line, it senses that I'm trying to snap to that point and snaps it to it. If I get close to the midpoint of one of these, right, let's see, or near or something like that. I don't know why it's not toggling here. Maybe it's because I have it set to ortho. Yeah, well, whatever. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and snap. Or you can actually see that up here in the next point of the polyline, there's an option just to simply close what you already have, and I'll just close it. Right. So there's lots of different ways to sort of play around with this. I'm just going to do this one more time before I start making copies of these things. Um, you'll notice that I have something called Smart Track on. What that means is that before I even start clicking, it'll start to understand, oh, like not only could I maybe snap to this line or to the midpoint of this line, but if I get close to it and then I move over, it's going to say, oh, you want to do a perpendicular from the midpoint maybe. And so it'll start to help me align things if I want to start making things that are aligned. So anyway, click a point, 40 feet, click, 40 feet, enter, and then which direction? Click. There we go. 40 feet, enter, and click. And I'll just snap over here to that point. We have it done. All right. It's again for those of you who have done this before. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like this is really the basics. But for those of you who are brand new, don't worry about it. You'll get to the hang of this. Try it out. Try the muscle memory. What I'm going to do now is just type in copy in the command line, and I'm just going to. So in the command line it says select the object to copy. I'm just going to click and drag a window from left to right and totally enclose both of these boxes. And when I'm select objects, when I'm done selecting all the objects I want to copy, press enter, right? You can press enter on your keyboard or you can just right click. Right click is like kind of the equivalent of enter on your keyboard. And so now I can click at this point and then tell it where I want that point now to go. There we go. There we go. So now I have four. I drew two manually and then I made copies of both of those to get four. Right? If I want to repeat the last command, I can just use the right mouse button and that'll automatically repeat the last command. So now if I want to make a copy of these, I can. Okay. So you'll start to understand once you get a little more fluent with the specifics of the interface. It'll start to make more sense. Now look what happens when I select some of this geometry I've already made. You see these green and red handles, these arrows, and then you see this sort of arc in some of these handles. Um, that's called gumball, and that they show on mine because I have gumball highlighted. If you don't have gumball highlighted, go ahead and highlight that down below. But what you can see now is that I can move things along those arrows very precisely, or sorry, along those axes, right? And if I just simply click on that arrow and I want to move this 20 feet in that direction, I can just type in 20 and it moved it 20 feet. If I want to move it 20 feet downwards, I'd say negative 20, right? And move it down. So if you like to use gumball, that's one way to do it. What I'll do is I'll show you that while we were drawing things in top view, meanwhile, what you can see in the 3D view is that we've been drawing on the XY plane where Z equals 0, right? And so you can see that three-dimensionally, the gumball also gives us a Z. We can move that up and down in Z. Um, we can also rotate these things, again, in 90-degree increments since we have ortho on. So that's one way you can quickly start to move things around as you start to rotate and move and that kind of stuff. So, all right. But let's go back to drawing. Let's get this drafting stuff taken care of. I'm going to go ahead and put these back where they go. All right. And I'll start with these. So let's start getting more fluent with drawing some of these shapes. And what I'm going to do is I already have all the outer outlines, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing all the inner line work. And I'm going to use some trimming and splitting in order to sort of take what's one piece into two pieces. All right. So let's do that right now. Um, what I can see is that I'm going to draw a couple of lines. First of all, I'm going to draw 4 feet down, and I'm going to draw, let's see, 4 plus 24, so 28 feet out, 6 feet down, 24 back, and then 30 down to match up here. All right, so let's just do that. I'm going to go back to my top view, just be really careful, make sure everything's set to ortho and planar is on. And I'm just going to go back to my polyline tool, and I'm just going to snap here at this point, and I'm going to go downwards. I said it was 4 feet down. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then it was how many feet over? It was 4 plus 24, so 28 feet over. Even I can do that math. All right, there we go. 6 feet down and then 24 over. Okay, so 6 feet down, six, enter, and then click. 24, did I say 24? Yeah, 24 back, and then which direction, and then click. And then I know it's 30 down, but I can also just go to the perpendicular intersection of the bottom, right? Snap there, and then when I'm done drawing, I right click to hit enter. I'm done. Now I have that curve, right? Mine is set to, because I have the white background, I set my selection to a different color than yellow, so that I have a little more contrast. I think it's like magenta or something. Um, but whatever. The default works. Don't worry about it. Um, Okay, so a couple of things here, right? One is that I have the start of this shape. What I'm just going to do really quickly, it's actually quicker than trimming and splitting at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and complete this sort of larger shape around these edges. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select this. Okay. This is the original curve I drew. Okay. And then this is the last curve I just drew. Now, you'll notice that the last curve I drew coincided partially with the first curve I drew, right? The outline. So when I try to select that curve, it Rhino doesn't know which one I'm trying to select because they overlap, right? And so when that happens, or you're close and you can't quite tell which item you're trying to select, it brings up the selection menu and you can go back and forth to see tell it which one you're trying to select. I want to select that one. I'm going to go ahead and hold down the shift key and select this one as well. All right, now I have all of these selected. What you'll notice is that I can select one of these line segments and it selects the entire polyline that I drew. I can select one of these line segments and it selects the entire polyline I drew. But right now, I have two different polylines, and I want to do is join them together into one closed shape. And so I'm selected both of them at the same time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this puzzle piece where the two puzzle pieces are being joined together. That's the join command. And so, I guess the icon actually makes some sort of logical sense there when sort of telling you what it does, right? So then I'm going to join them together, and it says two curves joined into one closed curve, which is exactly what I said I wanted to do. That's perfect, right? So now I have this curve, and I can move it over out of the way. I use that gumball, right? Just to sort of see what I have. All right, I'm just going to undo that and move it back. It's still joined together, right? I didn't undo that. Now I'm just going to draw this small sort of L upside down L shape really quickly. I'm just going to snap, 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 and snap, right? Okay, now it's like, which curve did you want to select? Oh, I have this one as well, right? And I can get rid of this. Now look at that. I have both of those. All right. And look at that. We're now starting to get something that resembles what we needed, right? Later, this larger piece will cut in several different ways. You have a choice to make there. But I'm just sort of pulling them apart just so we can keep stock of what we have. All right, so sorry to sort of, I don't want to make this too laborious, but I'm just going to quickly draw this out and just go over the steps one more time here. So we have 4 feet. This is what, 20, 32, 4, 32, 20, 4, 32, and 20. All right, so just going to start over here. 4, 32, 20. All right, let's see. Then, oh, sorry, no. 4, 32, 26. Okay. Ay, ay, ay. When I'm in the middle, I can hit undo, Right, there we go. And redo that last point. 26 feet down. I misspoke. 26 feet. All right, let's see. 20. And then down to the bottom. Oops. 20. And then down to the bottom. Here we go. Yeah, and then back around. So I'll make this shape first. And again, I'm just pulling this out so you can see what this shape looks like. Yeah, right? Just like that shaded, gray shaded area. All right, so now I'm just going to quickly just go around. This is quicker than trimming and splitting, honestly. Just go around and connect the dots. Something kind of satisfying about that anyway, right? I don't know. Let's just move this over. We'll move this. This is the overall outline. I'll just move that away. Just show our kit of parts here that we're developing. There we are. I'll move these over a little bit, give myself a little more space. All right. Oh, yeah, this is fun. We'll just make a nice hole in the inside here. So we go 16, 16, 8. All right, 16, 16, 8, 16, 10. So first of all, I want to locate this space, or this point, sorry. So it's 10 up and 16 over. 10 up, 16 over. I just go 10 up, 16 over. I have near. I don't want that on. Okay, so now I need to snap to that point for the actual hole. I'm just going to do that really quickly. I'm going to say, what is this? This is 20 by 16 rectangle inside 20. Oops. 16. What's it doing? All right. 16. I think my right mouse button is acting up on this thing. Like I said, I told you this was ancient, right? Like, all right, let's see. What is it doing? Start over. What was it? See, I've lost track. 20 by 16. All right. Ay, ay, ay. Close, C and spacebar to close. I can get rid of this little construction geometry here. Now I'm going to just make a copy of this because this is going to be a piece on its own. And then when I make a surface, I'm going to tell it to surface the inside of this outer shape and then cut out the inner shape later. So I'm going to leave it just like that. All right. And then let's see. Last one. Yeah, finally, at long last. 32. Okay, so let's see. We go 6 over and 32 down, 6, 32, 4, 6, 32, 4. So go from here, 6 over, 32, oops, 32 down. What's it doing? There we go, 32 down, 4 over. Is it just back up? Yeah, it sure is. Okay. So just back up, perpendicular snap, snap around the vertices, close it up at the end. There we go. And then instead of going snap, 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 I'm just going to make you see there's a rectangular tool. Just, I can snap to that and then the sort of opposing vertex here, vertex, and get that guy right there. Yeah, there we go. All right, so there's the original curve. And here's my new one. There we go. All right, all right, all right. Okay, so um, we're almost there. All right, once these templates are drawn, they provide the way to divide or split the original squares into more complex shape, as you can see here. Now, the shaded portions, those are the larger pieces. We can subdivide these into the manner below. And you can pick where you actually make this. Let's say, for instance, this is panel A. It says to divide panel A into 2 parts, one sort of cut or one split command, right? And so I just did it horizontally at this point, but you can do it anywhere. That's your choice. So here's what I'll show you how to like trim and split really quickly. And then, I'll probably, demonstrate that I can actually pick and choose where I actually slice these things. All right, so I'm just going to draw another polyline or line, and I'm just going to pick a place to cut this. I'll pick right here, and I'll just draw a line across. So what I'm doing is I'm just drawing a piece of construction geometry that I'm going to use to sort of split right? This shape into two. Here's the trim and here's the split icons. Um, and here's the difference between trim and split, right? First of all, I'll use trim. Trim says select the cutting object. So I'm going to go ahead and select this new line that I drew. And it says select the object to trim away. So if I select this part, it's going to disappear and disappear forever, right? And so now I have this left, but I don't have the part that I trimmed away. If I want to keep both pieces, I want to split this thing and keep both pieces, then I use split, right? So if I use split, then it says select the objects to split, and then and then I can right click when I'm done selecting those. Then select any cutting objects. So I'll select this and then hit enter. And you can see that now I have both pieces remain, right? So if I want to trim something away and delete the part out that I'm trimming, perfect. I use trim. If I want to split something into two or more pieces and keep all of those pieces, I use split. Okay. I can get rid of this line or this curve now. And I'm just going to move this down a bit. And you can see now I just need to close up these shapes again. And I do that by just drawing more polylines. I can snap to that endpoint, snap to this point. You can see that they're not joined yet. I can select them all together by dragging a box around all of it and then hitting that join button again. And likewise, let's say I have a piece over here that I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of this line right here. If I select this closed polyline, I can do the opposite of join. Next to it, looks like a flash or explosion in the icon. I can explode it. And now suddenly I don't have one closed polyline. I have a bunch of individual line segments, right? Just like in AutoCAD if you're used to that. Okay. Go ahead and undo that because I want to keep that closed. Pretty anal retentive when it comes to that stuff. All right, here we go. There we are. And go ahead and join those together. All right. And I'll do it again. Let's see. This one wants to split this shape, this sort of awkward backward C or something, into three pieces. So two cuts, right? And so again, I'm just going to select a couple of places to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to snap there and do it there. I'm going to snap here and do it that direction. Again, 90-degree increments, no curves, no zigzags. Keep it 90 degrees. Keep things planar. Keep things straight. Orthographic today for this exercise. Let's see, and I'm just going to go ahead and use split. So here I'm going to say split. Again, if in doubt, whenever you hit one of these tools, look at the tool, sorry, the command line at top. It'll tell you what it wants and in the order that it wants them in. So select the objects to split. So I'm going to select this closed shape. And it says once you've selected all the objects to split, press enter. So I get that. Sometimes people forget that. They just want to select the thing and then select the cutting object, hit enter, select any cutting objects. This time I have two different cutting objects, this one, and hit enter. And I have four pieces, right? Not a big surprise. Let me delete away the cutting objects. But I have this guy. These two sides are not connected at all. And then I have this one, right? So if I pull this one out, you can see that I just need to close this up. I need to close this up. Yeah, let's just do that really quickly. But this one, I have two things. I can, by default, I think now in Rhino 8, if I select a curve, it shows me the vertices. And if I just carefully click on that vertex, it just selects that vertex, and then I can move it, free move, or I can use the gumball. Um, but it's a point, just like any other thing, a curve or a surface. I can just simply type in the move command, MOVE. You see how I typed in move? And it didn't tell us since move. And now I can just click. There's the target, or sorry, there's the reference point, and then here's the target point. Click, right? And suddenly I moved that vertex over to snap with this other vertex, and now it's closed. Yay. For this one, maybe a little more difficult, right? For instance, you'll see that we had one edge and one edge. They couldn't possibly be joined together because they didn't have anything coinciding. I just added this new line or this new curve. I'm just going to go ahead and hold the shift key, select this curve, and this curve, and hit join. I'll go ahead and move this one over. And now we just need to do the same thing. We need to close this one up and close this one up. I'll do this one down at the bottom first, make a line, select them, hit join. All right. Do you notice that Rhino uses the line and curve sort of interchangeably? And it just has something to do with mathematics and geometry, right? So if you think about um, every line is a curve, but not every curve is a line. So the way the way CAD usually defines a line is the shortest distance between 2 points, right? Which I think is pretty intuitive. But if you think about it differently, you think about the mathematical polynomials defining the geometry itself that's being graphed in X, Y, and Z. Then, if you guys remember Algebra 2 and calculus, if you use any parabolas or hyperbolas. But basically, where I was going with this is lines are just curves with zero curvature as a parameter for the curvature, right? So they're basically just first degree curves as opposed to third degree or seventh degree curves. So um, I'm just going to click that. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to draw another line here. I don't care. I just need to join them all together so they're one closed curve. Yeah, perfect. There we are. We need to break this up into four different parts. I'll do something similar to what I did over there. I'm just going to, again, you can pick and choose. You can always come back. You notice that I made copies of the original squares, but I didn't make copies of these before I started to trim. I would actually recommend sort of doing this iteratively, where you make copies of everything just so you have them. You can put them on different layers and turn them off, and only turn them back on if you need to go backwards a step. Maybe you're putting these things together and you're like, man, I really wish I had trimmed that differently now, or something like that. You can always go back and redo. You're in control, you're in charge. But I'm just going to simply split. I want to split this and then enter, and then with these and hit enter. All right, I go ahead and select those and delete them. And then you'll see that I have this one and this one and these. And I'm just going to simply close these bad boys up. So right click to repeat that last command of draw a line, click, click, enter when I'm done, or right click when I'm done, right click to repeat the last command, click, click, right click to done, right click to repeat the last command, click, click, right click done, right click to repeat the last command, click, click. Okay. Just muscle memory you build up by doing this. Okay. And last but not least, just cut this into two parts. I actually did something weird and cut it like again, it doesn't matter. The line doesn't that you're using to cut doesn't have to be straight. I think was the only thing I was really trying to demonstrate here. I'll just do it just to show you, right? Split this with this, get rid of that. And here we are. And you know what? I'm not going to get rid of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this away. Here we go. I already have those two edges. I just need to trim this out and join together, right? So um, I can easily do, instead of a split, I can do a trim, right? Select the cutting objects. I'm going to use this as my cutting object. And then what parts do I want to trim away? That one and that one. And that leaves the remainder back behind. I can select all of that stuff up and join, right? So again, I'm recording this, so if this is completely alien to you, you can go back and rewatch it and practice at home. And that's what this really is set up to do, is to let you practice. Need to. You see that it was easy to click out here and then move in this direction, but then how far? What I did is I let it snap to this endpoint, not clicking. And then because I have Smart Track on, I can quickly sort of slowly move that up, and it keeps the alignment. And I can click, and then I can click and close that up, right? So join together. All right, now I have all my pieces. Yay! So it's so good. All right. And again, I can see them three-dimensionally in my perspective view. Of course, in front and right view, the side views, they all just look like flat lines along the y-axis because they're on that XY plane. So they're on axis with us, and they're thin lines. So anyway, in perspective view, I'm just going to show you this. Right now, I think by default, our perspective view is set to wireframe. In other words, all we do is we see like curves and the edges and things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the perspective, and you see this little pull down next to the label. I'm going to say, oh, I think it's set to shaded. I'll just leave it as shaded then, right? I'll leave it as shaded. But one thing that you noticed, or I didn't actually set this out, but you probably noticed this, and maybe you're wondering what I did. If you double click on any of these labels of the viewports, it expands that viewport to fill your screen. The other three disappear. And if you double click again, then it toggles back to the four views. Okay. So if I want to see something in perspective and I want some real screen real estate here to do it, I can double click on that perspective label. blow it up to the full window, double click later to go back and look at something in right hand view or whatever it is. Okay, so um, now what do I need to do? Right now, these are all just curves. There's no surface to them. There's no like, again, it's like all the edges, but without any like faces. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to surface the insides of these things. These are all closed planar curves. I know that because I drew them on the XY plane in planar mode, and I made sure everything was curved and or closed and joined. And so what I can do is I can again points, curves, surfaces, right? I go down to my very first surface tool. I know that they're surface because they're shaded with this blue. And I'm just going to click and hold and pull this out. These are all the different ways to create surfaces. And this second one right here looks kind of like a donut from the top. Surface from planar curves. What I can do is I can click it. It asks for any planar curves to build a surface within. So I can go ahead and select this one, right? You can see since I've been shaded mode that now it's sort of, again, now that there's a face there, like actual surface geometry, you can see light bouncing off of it and back to our eyes, right? Whereas before there was nothing there, it was just empty space in between curves, lines, okay? Um, and I can do that with each of these, or I can just do them all at once. So if I just select a bunch together, what it's going to do is it's going to look for any and all closed curves and then fill inside each of one, right? I'm just going to do that over here as well. Right? Remember, right click, you can just repeat the last command. So if you're moving something over and over again, copying or etc., you can just always use that right click to repeat the last command. Right click to enter when you're done. All right. At this point, I have both surface and I also have the curves that were used to make them, right? So when I click near the edge, it says, do you want the surface edge or do you want the curves that you drew originally? Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to select all the surfaces and put them on the surface layer. And that way I can make a copy of them and I can then turn off the curves unless I need them later, etc. Right? So I'm sort of trying to iteratively save things, um, save some of the process along the way, putting things in different layers. So the way I'm going to do this, since I didn't set my active layer to surfaces before I created the surfaces, right, which I could have done by simply hitting the check mark. So if I do that, watch what happens when I now create a surface. I'll just do that up here. The surface is on the surfaces layer, and that surfaces layer happens to be the default color happens to be red. So you'll see that it shows up in the shaded view as red, just like in AutoCAD, where you start to see all yellows, reds, blues, greens, etc. Depending on if it's a wall or a pattern, a hatch, whatever, window, door. Um, I'll get rid of that. But since I didn't do that ahead of time, I don't want to have to like redraw all the surfaces. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to select them. I'm just going to go ahead and what you'll notice is that you see these little isoparametric curves, isoparms on the inside. That's just the way curves are described in Rhino. They're called NURB surfaces, and there's a mathematical underpinning behind them. But one of the things that does is it actually gives us these iso curves, isoparms, and they're basically just there to sort of show us the geometry of the surface. This is all planar geometry, so it's really quite easy to understand that. But I'm just going to go ahead and select the insides of these shapes, holding down the shift key so I can select several at once. Let's see, several as I go. Just sort of click near those ISO curves. If you click too near the edge, it's going to ask you, do you want to select the line, the curve again, the outline, or the surface itself? And I just want to click the inside and get the surfaces, right? Just select, click, holding down the shift key, selecting more items at once. Here we go. Do I have them? Nope, not quite. I'm using that middle scroll to sort of zoom in and out dynamically as I go. Here we are. Now, when I have all of those selected, what I can do, please watch if you're not, it is very important. Over here under layers, right, has this little pie wedge, red, white, blue, sort of layers, something sliced into layers. But down below, I have a color wheel. And if I select that, then I go to the properties of all the objects I have selected. And right now it's telling me that all of these surfaces that I have selected are on the layer line work. That was the default layer. And what I can do is I can go to that check or that pull down and I can then change it to surfaces. Right? So now all of them are on the surfaces layer and they all should look red. and shaded. Yeah, perfect. And what I can do is I can then turn off all the line work layer. They're still all the line work's there. They just turned it off so I don't see them anymore. And I can't accidentally select them, move them, delete them, anything else. They're preserved for posterity reasons. If I want to use them, reuse them later. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these. I'm going to make a copy of these just so I if I need to go back and I screw up a piece somehow, lose it, or something like that, I can go back to the original kit of parts that I have. Um, so maybe I'll just say I'll um, label another layer here, surfaces old or archive or something like that, and I'll just drag a box around all of these first ones here. Go back to the color wheel, go to layer, put them on surfaces old, go back to my layers, right? And then I can turn that surfaces old layer off and I have my new surfaces ready to roll. All right. So here at this point, I'm going to look at the three-dimensional view, in this case, perspective view. And again, as I right click, I can sort of dolly around. I can zoom in and out. I can select things just as easily. I can now move things in X, Y, and Z. So you got to be careful in this view because sometimes you think you might be moving something in X or Y, but you might also be moving it in Z, but you can't really tell. So anyway, more about that here in a bit. Um, I have all my pieces, and let's see what it says. First, using only right angle intersections, put together all of the component parts. Sorry, nine of them. You're supposed to use nine out of the 15 that you have into a spatial composition that fits within an imagined 40 feet by 20 feet by 40 feet box. So 40 feet deep, 20 feet wide, and 40 feet tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create that box. And then now I have a sort of volume that I can fit these things within. So I can make sure that I'm constrained to the requirements. 40 feet, 20 feet, 40 feet. All right. So let's see here. What I'm going to do, first of all, I'm thinking a step or two ahead. I have line work, surfaces, surfaces old. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say box or volume or something like that. That happened to be layer three, and I'm just renaming it to box. And you see where this check mark is? I'm going to go ahead and along the box line item here, I'm going to go over and click right here and move that check mark to the box layer. What that means is that the box layer is now the active layer. So anything I do, anything I make or create from here on out will automatically be in that box layer rather than the line work or surfaces or surface sold layer. All right, so sometimes when I'm thinking advanced, I can actually do that. It's kind of nice. And now let's go over here. I'm going to make instead of making each face separately with a surface, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a box, corner to corner and height. Okay, and so first corner of base, and I'm just going to simply type in some dimensions. I'm going to say 0, comma 0, comma 0 on my keyboard. You can see that I was typing that out for me in the command line. That's the first corner, right? I can just give it X, Y, Z coordinates. Now it said it wanted it to be 40 feet deep, 20 feet wide. Okay. So now I'm going to say 20 feet, comma 40, comma 0, right? X, comma Y, comma Z. And then hit click. And now for the height, I want 40. There we are. And so that's our box. Sort of 2-to-1 aspect ratio from the top and a square from this side, 40 by 20 by 40. And now we have a volume that we can begin to take 9 of these and begin to compose them on the inside. Okay. Now, if it starts to get overcrowded, show me how you fit 9 in and then show me which ones you subtracted afterwards, right? The key here is that this is a process, right? And what I'm really interested in is what are you doing? How do you follow the directions? But then how do you begin to analyze what you're doing, make some decisions on your own, and then showing me step by step what you were doing, the logic behind it, okay? So this is, I said already, I think in perspective view, it's already toggled to shaded mode by default. If I click or on the little caret here next to perspective on the label, you can see that it's already set to shaded. I could set it to wireframe. That's what it looks like. Or I could set it to rendered, and it'll look like a series of white surfaces, white clay in a white field. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this to ghosted or maybe even X-ray. Let's see, let's try X-ray. What you can see is that I can kind of see through things now. It's kind of, you can still see maybe I'll turn it to ghosted first. Let's try ghosted. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I can see through this thing. It's a little bit, it's slightly ghosted. It's got slightly X-rayed. And so that's going to allow me to sort of compose planes on the inside. And then I can always just turn the box layer on and off, go back to my surfaces, turn this on and off as I need to sort of evaluate it without this box in the way. But let's say, for instance, I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it. I'm going to go ahead and use the move command to type in move. And I can snap to this corner to then, let's say, look at this. This is interesting. I'll snap it to this edge. But let's say I have the midpoint selected. So let's see if I can snap it to the midpoint here. There we go, midpoint. And so now that very much goes to these two faces, and also has a point that coincides with this edge, right? This corner. Um, and so you'll see that there's some rules to find at least three edges of the imagined box somehow, right? So we need at least three edges or faces to sort of be touched by a surface. Fill the box, but don't necessarily put things on the outside. And then create at least five distinct spaces or define five distinct spaces. Here are some examples that I used to have students do out of foam core. And I hope you can sort of see this and understand it. But right, there aren't any like enclosed volumes or rooms yet. And yet I would say that we've defined some spaces, right? So for instance, if you look inside of, let's see, this one, right? We have a space on the outside, almost like a balcony space. We have a space on top here. We have a multi-story volume on the inside that actually interlocks with the mezzanine that overlooks it, right? And so if you think about this as sort of a spatial composition, I'm not asking you to design a building yet. I'm asking you to compose planes in space and as a result, start to create some sort of spatial interlock. Okay. Again, you're using surfaces and composing them to create interesting form on the outside. And on the inside, you're looking at the space in between, right? And that's a lot of what we do, or a lot of like how we like to think when it comes to architecture. Um, you know, so anyway, let's see. From here, I can go ahead and start to snap things together. Let's see. I want to use this piece, but I know that I'm going to need to sort of rotate it to fit it in. So I'm going to rotate it this direction, 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate it in this green direction, 90 degrees. All right. Now that's in the right orientation that I was thinking, I can snap it right here. And then I don't want it to be on that outer edge. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. And I'm going to say snap and then snap it over here. It's going to be a nice sort of structural pier. As soon as I can move it over to down to this edge, let's see, the perpendicular to that bottom and just move. And so I'm just typing in move sometimes, and then I can select the object to move, enter when I'm done, or right click. And then I can start to snap to the point that I want to move from and the point that I want to move to. Right? Okay. You can similarly type in rotate if you don't like the gumball tool, and I could say rotate this, what the point to rotate it out, the center of rotation, and I could type in like an angle, like 90 degrees. Now it's rotated 90 degrees, right? But I like in the three-dimensional view to just simply use the gumball, right? And if for some reason it's not letting you just sort of freehand it in 90-degree increments, you can always click it and then type in 180, let's say. It's 180 degrees spun, right? Or 90 degrees or 270 or whatever. All right. If you do 360, it's just going to end up in the exact same place, as you know. All right. So anyway, that's how you can start to compose these things into space. And I provided some of these examples just to sort of get the gears in your brain going, right? Like I am not interested in something that looks normal. I'm interested in you in this abstraction of simply taking a set of planar components, putting them together in really interesting ways. And again, really thinking about then what happens if you were able to shrink yourself down into this 40 foot by 20 foot by 40 foot volume and inhabit these spaces. You don't have to worry about circulation or elevators or stairs yet, but just think about the kinds of spatial quality and volumes that you have on the inside. And then tomorrow, for part two, right? For those of you who are ready to move on by then, right? We'll take this box and we'll take our remaining six pieces. You're supposed to use nine on the inside of this thing. The remaining six we'll actually put onto the outside and use to cut holes or cut openings, right? And so that way we'll actually have a very similar vocabulary between the planes on the inside and the planar openings on the outside, right? So let me just show you that. I can demonstrate that in the next 15 minutes. And then I'll show you how to turn the sun on so that you can start to see, well, what happens when I make an opening? What does that do? And let's say on a really warm day in June in the afternoon or in the morning time in the winter or whatever, right? Depending on what this thing is, where this thing is facing and its relationship to the sun. All right, so um, really quickly, I'll just show you how that might work. What I can do, let me just pick one of these. Let me pick this one. I like these. I like these right here. I like making like sort of either horizontal or vertical sort of striations. And I like making openings like that. Let me just move this down so it's a little closer to me. So let's say this is one of my leftovers, six leftovers. And first of all, I'm going to go ahead and select it. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. Make sure three-dimensionally I'm picking the right axis to rotate it in. There we are. Oh yeah, look at that. So good. Rotate it this way. And I'm going to place this somehow. Oops, hit the wrong button there. Rotate, or sorry, move. Or I could just type in MOV. And I'm going to snap. Let's just snap it here. Where's it not? Why is it not snapping? There we go. Now I'm just simply going to select this and use the gumball and move it over, let's say this way. Maybe I bend the rules a little bit. I kind of like this idea of like having the opening sort of get to the edge and then wrap and then turn this way and also open up the top a little bit. I don't know. But anyway, let's take a look at this first. So what I can do is I can try to subtract one from the other. Um, what I'm going to do is, in this case, let's see, the easiest way to do this might be, I think, to just simply take this surface and extrude it. So I'm going to go back to my surface commands, right? Pull those out, click and drag, or click and hold, and then I can drag that out. And I have all my surface making tools out here instead of just the one. And so I can use extrude, extrude straight. Yeah, let's extrude. Oops. I'm going to try to select this surface. Yeah, let me just type in extrude. Extrude. There should be an extrude surface. There we go. Extrude surf. Let's select this surface. Just extrude this through. And I'm just extruding this out, but I'm also going to say solid no. I'm going to say extrude to both directions. Yes, I'm going to make this sort of cut through. Did I say solid yes? Oops, let me redo that. Solid no. Just that. Here we go. So now we see that we can use this to trim or split, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use it to trim and split. I'm going to say split. What do I want to split? This. What do I use to split it? This. All right. I'll get rid of this trimming thing now. I'll get rid of this. I'll get rid of this. I'll get rid of this. All right. Now I have a hole there, right? All right. So that's how we can start to use trim and split on the outside. I can demonstrate that further and repeat tomorrow for those that are ready. But if you want to work ahead, that's kind of how you do it. And then last but not least, there are ways that we can sort of give these things thickness. Right now, they're surfaces, and what we want to do is sort of extrude them or give them some sort of thickness. We could use the extrude surface tool that I just used, for instance. So if I think about the inside of this thing, I'm going to take this first surface I put inside. Let me go ahead and take that, turn that box off. I'll just say extrude surf, and I'll extrude it this way. I'll say solid yes, both sides no, then I'll just give me one direction. And then I can type something in. Let's say this is going to be a nice thick floor plane. I'm going to give it 2 feet. It's a pretty beefy thing. There might be some structure underneath this that's 18 inch. And then when you enclose it with some sort of ceiling, we'll just quickly, say, that's going to be a big, thick slab, and with some structure inside somehow. And then I can say extrude surface, and I can extrude this one. And again, this part of the composition, I can begin to let's call this zero point 0.5 feet, 6 inches, right? And I can start to give these things some thickness, right? So try your best, fail early, fail often. Save your process, iteratively save or make a copy of things before and put them on a different layer before you do something potentially destructive that you can't undo, right? And what I want to do is see where everybody's at tomorrow morning, right? Tomorrow is going to be, okay, you tried, and let's see where you succeeded. If you haven't encountered any challenges or issues, we'll get you over that learning curve, that little speed bump that we're hitting. And that way you can have a really productive weekend over the long weekend. Okay. Really quickly, while I'm recording, I'll show you where this is going. Right. So as I start to, let's turn this, let's say, can I extrude this? See, this is a poly surface that's sort of, that has a trim in it. So here's a different way I can give these things depth. I think I can say offset surf. And I'm going to select the poly surface. And now it's going to say, well, which direction do you want to offset, to the outside or the inside? And if I go up to the command line, I can say flip all. Now let's see, offset to the inside. Solid is set to yes. If I want to turn that off, I can say no. But if it's set to no and you want yes, you just click, right? And then the distance, and that looks like an inch because that's at 112.166666 repeated. So I'm just going to say, let's do 1 foot, the inside. And solid, yes. Delete input. No, I don't want to delete this. All right. Let's see if that worked or not. Yeah, it did. And now I still have that original poly surface. I'd probably put that on an old layer. I'm just going to delete it for this purposes. All right. So there's different ways you can use these tools depending on how you want to do this. Last but not least, if you do want to uh, start playing around with the part three, which we'll go over on Tuesday in detail. So don't worry. I'm trying to show people that want to work ahead, how to work ahead, but but don't worry if you're starting to just crawl, that's perfectly fine. All right. This is recorded. You can always refer back to it. If not today, tomorrow, the next day, even on Tuesday if you need to. But I will repeat things as necessary, and I will always be there to help you out. Okay. So. Let's go to rendered mode. Yeah, why not? Let's try rendered. Yeah. I'm also going to, not only can I change like how things are displayed, but I can also set my view to something different. By default, I think this is set to perspective, but if I set it to isometric, right, I can get an axon drawing of it. That northeast view is hiding everything from me, so maybe I do isometric southeast. Oh, that's also a boring view. Let's see. Northwest. Let's try that. All right, whatever. And I can begin to turn some things on or off here. I'll show you actually how you can start to do these different display modes. If I go to technical, I get basically a hidden line drawing. And I can turn things on or off like hidden lines and dashed lines, center lines. Um, I'll show you on Tuesday how you can make your own display mode where you can take both and combine. So you can get all of these sort of lines and edges. You can also change the line types. You can also have everything with this sort of diffuse light and have it rendered with the soft shadows. And at the same time, set line weights. So you can start to set a line weight strategy around silhouettes versus interior curves and edges, right? So again, we'll just sort of build up. We start simple and we just keep working. We just keep working. And guess what? This is going to be a piece of your museum when you're done, right? You just don't know it yet. Because if I told you you're designing a building and you start with, okay, here's my box and here's some walls and I extrude them up, it gets really boring, right? You're not going to have a very boring interior if you start thinking with these shapes and how we compose them in space. You're going to have a really phenomenal, interesting interior, full of all kinds of interesting nooks and crannies. And then we'll start to gradually edit and turn it and align it and turn it into a piece of architecture. And while you're doing one right now to focus, eventually you'll do three more. So you have four sort of modules. And then when we turn a corner in the early July and start to work with Revit, then we'll deploy these modules on the site. You can begin to turn the sun on, really start to fine tune some things in Revit, and at the same time start to work with the structure that holds these things, these vessels, and that holds up the circulation that connects things. We'll talk about critical things like not only circulation, but then critical life safety, egress, those sorts of things, why we have railings, why we have fire stairs, etc. And we'll work methodically, right? Okay. So keep that in mind. What you're doing is you're designing a module for your museum eventually. But for right now, I'm just asking you to compose planes, create some really interesting volumes and sort of spatial sequence on the inside. Then for tomorrow, I'll show again. We can close it in the box and then start to very carefully start to make openings to allow light inside. What I didn't show yet is I can turn on the sun, turn the sun on. And if I go to rendered mode and I can actually set my location, search for Las Vegas. So now it knows my latitude. And see, it says, tells me exactly what my latitude is and my longitude, which is important because if I want to set a date and time, then it needs to know where the sun is in the sky. And so if I say March 21st, what's today? June 10th. June 10th, why not? And it's 11 or so, right? I can make the shadows crisper later on if I want. But now I can get inside this thing and I can begin to see where I have problems or don't have problems with sun getting inside, right? So if I go inside, let me just zoom in on the center here, zoom in a little bit, see if I can get on the inside here. I'll show you more about how to do this on Tuesday as well. We'll start framing axons and perspectives. Boy, boy, Rhino's not making it easy for me today. What's going on here? I'll just go to shade it and get inside this thing really quickly. Oh, it's because I'm in parallel view. Okay. Sorry, I'll go back to perspective. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, there we go. Now it sort of looks better. Yeah, there's one other thing I'm going to change here in the perspective. Oops. And that is, look at this perspective view. If I go to the viewport properties, so I click on the perspective label, here I can change the render or the view mode, etc. Go to the viewport properties. It's going to pull them up over here in the properties box. The lens length is set to 50 millimeter. I actually have a 50 millimeter lens for my Nikon. It zooms in really far. It's annoying sometimes. It makes you a better photographer because then you have to really think about the frame and where you're at and the subject. Um, but if you say 35 millimeter, then suddenly it gives you a wider angle and you can start to see more. And the human eye is closer to like 28 millimeters when you start to think about peripheral vision. And so I'm just going to change that camera and I'll go over this again. Remember, I'm recording this if you need to think about how did he make the camera look better, right? You can always go back and rewatch this. Just sort of skip towards the end or watch it in double speed or quadruple speed. Make me sound like a silly kid or something. But anyway, you can start to get inside. Let's just turn this back to render. Let's see what it looks like, right? So now we can start to see some of this, but I can go to my render settings and I can start to change these things. Again, we'll talk about these things more in on Tuesday, because then we'll start to cut sections. We'll look at perspective. We'll look at axon. We'll start to make a series of diagrams simultaneously. We'll start to get in the inside of these things and look at what we have. Start moving the sun through the sky to see what kind of opportunities and challenges it presents. But anyway, that's quickly where we're kind of going with this. Why you're doing what we're doing. And so let me just, oops, here we go. You can see that the sun intensity is pretty bright. If I maybe turn that sun intensity down a bit, oof, that's a little better. And then we can start to see a little more contrast between dark and bright spaces, shadows, and etc. All right, so That's it for the day. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Stop recording.